Hey, it's Matt O'Leary, and it's time for New Music Monthly, where I cover a number of new released albums in alternative rock and indie rock and prog and jazz and pop and metal and, all the usual stuff. I want to make sure to comment on the most anticipated albums, but I also am just really laser focused with these episodes on giving you at least 2 to 3 albums every month that hit you out of nowhere, that are total oddballs and curveballs and, just blow your house down. So in that spirit, we've got first up this psychedelic prog band that my buddy Nick from high school turned me on to. So shout out to Nick, you're the man. It's Mondo Drag with Through the Hourglass. And when I saw this cover, I don't know about you, but it just kind of screams like punk or something in that vein to me. But actually, this is some heavy psychedelic prog, like straight out of the 70s. There's some kind of Richard Wright-esque, very languid kind of stuff in here, like the first half of the song Passages, this 11-minute epic. Lots of organ and slow, spacey tracks are occasionally broken up by heavy psych riffs and blazing synths. There's very sparse, very minimal vocals, and they kind of sound like Greg Lake, a little bit like Justin Hayward from the Moody Blues, but they're not really that good, so it's kind of nice that they're only occasional. This dreamy, spacey nature of the album really matches the theme of time slipping away and just a regret over lost time, and especially considering this is their first album in 6 years. Apparently they had a lot of loss and tragedy in that time, that off time. So it's nice to just see the band get on their feet and make music again. And it's a pretty solid album if you like 70s prog. And keeping up with the psychedelic theme, we've got this third album from a Norwegian trio, self-produced. It's called Women by Orions Belte. This is kind of a sneaky inclusion here because I'm actually really interested in you listening to their first album from 2018 called Mint, which is just this instrumental rock album that you can't miss. It's very eclectic stuff. You got this haphazard surf rock sound, and then you got kind of an indie garage aesthetic, but also some jazz and some funk and some West African sounds, and even some blues guitar. So yeah, it's a tough album to pin down, but really what holds it all together, what really melds it, is just fantastic chord progressions and melodies. This new album continues the trend of running away from a guitar-centric sound and experimenting with more textures. You got an expanded instrumental palette to include strings and more vocal guests and more electronic beats, all of which I'm open to in theory, but I just feel like the actual composition doesn't quite measure up to the first album especially, but even the second album. The opening track is kind of a statement piece. You got this section where the guitar is lilting in and out, and then the strings are responding in very frantic and sometimes dissonant ways. And as beautiful as sections of that string arrangement are, I'm not really into the core song. And the same has to be said for other experiments on the album like Slice Co. Yeah, this was a disappointment for sure. Like, I really like this band. I really love the first album, but I feel like as they expanded to just include and absorb more of their influences, they also that purity, that cohesion of the original sound just got diluted. But there is a little magic here. So if you like bands like Khruangbin or Unknown Mortal Orchestra, or I think of a jazz act like the Matson 2, or even like a psych band like Morgan Delt, then I think you should give this a try. Now it's time for an extremely underrated prog rock album that sadly I just haven't heard any buzz about this album, but it definitely deserves it. German band Subsignal's sixth album, A Poetry of Rain, is a little bit neo-prog, a little bit prog metal, and a little bit of their contemporaries from Germany, RPWL, who have also released a great album this year. A Poetry of Rain is a very tidy, a very melody-centric prog album with tons of undeniable hooks and just very intricate but also tasteful playing that seems to get better and better as I listen. Arlo Mensah's voice gives me a little bit of Ross Jennings, especially on a ballad like Impasse, but with a nice vibrato in his voice like James LaBrie, a little less intense, a little more natural, I think, sounding than LaBrie's. Song after song on this thing hits for me and offers complexity, but also a very warm, a very welcoming symphonic prog sound. It's very majestic and classically beautiful and not too edgy, but still very complex compositionally with plenty of left turns and just some very strange blending of tones and textures. This is one of my surprises of the year, no doubt, and it just keeps creeping up that top albums of the year list and filling this void very similar to the Lonely Robot album from last year. English indie rock vets make the cut this month with their 6th album called My Big Day. It's Bombay Bicycle Club.
Out there they will cry your tears out.
I'm new to this band, but they're way bigger than I thought, able to draw in some really top-notch artists like Damon Albarn and Niloufar Yanya and Shaka Khan. And the production spot from Dave Fridman just pulled me in to whatever's going on here. The J-Som collab Sleepless is a breezy bop, a little bit Mac DeMarco. They've got some psych sounds just scattered across this album. There are songs like I Want to Be Your Only Pet or something like Rural Radio Predicts the Rapture. These have soul and hip-hop influences in the beats. The opener, Just a Little More Time, sets that very thick hip-hop groove as well. But the whole album has a very twee lightness of spirit, but it's extroverted. It's happy and outgoing and definitely not a bedroom indie sound. And good songs across the thing, most of which have a very memorable, very unique vibe. Something's got to keep indie rock rolling, and this is one of the most pure indie rock albums I've heard this year that actually does it well. This next band is led by a guy who went to my high school. My memories of him include shredding John Mayer's Slow Dancing in a Burning Room at a talent show and playing in Horace in Les Mis, singing Lamarck is Dead. So from that to this hard rock, sci-fi, psych metal glory, it's Glass Futures by Howling Giant. They opened for bands like Elder and King Buffalo on recent tours, and honestly, those are pretty good sound-alikes, like good comparisons, especially if you like the vocals of King Buffalo. It's a very similar style. There are some kind of generic moments that feel just like a genre play to me. They don't really stand out from the crowd in any way particularly. Some of the progressions and riffs and melodies feel a little bit obvious, although their execution of this heavy metal, stoner rock, psych metal sound is pretty spot on. I think they really hit their stride on a song like First Blood of Melkor or the title track, where there's a little more technicality. It's a very Mastodon-like sound. It's totally a gird your loins, put on your breastplate, join the battalion type of heavy metal album. Just fun, uncompromising, and a total nerd fest. Which brings us to the 25th album by what I think is the best rock band of the past 6 or 7 years. This album is tied musically to the one that came out earlier this year, Petro-Draganic Apocalypse. The silver chord lands somewhere between club dance music and techno from the 90s and disco from the 80s. The strong progression on the title track makes those glitzy synths and program beats really work for me. But most of the album is pretty monotonous. They're really jamming on one chord a lot. And I guess that kind of makes sense for the type of music. It's supposed to be for a certain environment and hypnotic. But I find myself just waiting around for that chord change, like parts of the album, like the end of Swan Song or the end of Change. But songs like Gilgamesh and Set are just very compositionally flat for me. You know, you can throw all the bells and whistles, all the cool vocals, all the rapping on top of them, and it doesn't make the writing any more interesting. Which makes the extended version of the album really too much, like almost unlistenable for me. And that's kind of the great thing about King Giz. You know, if you love the band, you can still just completely dismiss certain albums because there's always something else coming. There's so much great music that there's probably like 6 or 7 albums from these guys that I never return to, and they're one of my favorite bands. And from one favorite band to another, we've got the song that everybody's talking about, and a band that I've rarely talked about on the channel. It's of course the Beatles, who, in my opinion, like all this rock and pop music that I listen to, all the stuff I love, all the stuff my friends love, is indebted to them. And I just gotta say, like, putting Strawberry Fields Forever on one side and then whoop, flip it, Penny Lane on 1 7-inch, that is one of the best moments in rock music history. It's gotta be. Those songs just blow away like 99.9% of songs, period. You know, the veneer of simplicity and fun and whimsy that they're able to achieve while also having this underlying complexity to the writing is just second to none. And yeah, I'm definitely a big fan of this new song. You know, it's kind of a Frankenstein monster from just a production perspective. Could they have tried to achieve a little bit more of a vintage sound with some of the new recordings? Maybe. But the strength of that core song just totally overwhelms that. Lennon's melody is perfect. You know, that demoed vocal performance cuts right to the soul. The added strings and the slide guitar bring added dynamics and depth. They even got those little, you know, Day Tripper-esque pentatonic riffs in there in the transitions. The drama of that instrumental at the end is superb. Like, amazing writing, very much in the spirit of the band. We're coming up to that end of year list time. I'm really looking forward to it, but I'm also hoping that there are a few more really good releases before the year is done. I know I'm really looking forward to a couple albums, Moon Safari probably being number 1 for me. I've heard the single to that album. I really love it. So looking forward to that, but let me know if there's anything I'm missing. Let me know if you loved some of the picks from this month. And as always, thank you so much for watching.